This is Extra Points, a Pop Warner podcast. I'm your host, Tim Glaze. We're sharing some of the most compelling stories in sports. On this episode, we sit down with the trailblazer who changed the quarterback position forever. A CFL legend and an NFL great, one of the most prolific passers the game has ever seen. Here's Hall of Famer Warren Moon. All right, Warren Moon, thank you for joining us here on the Extra Points podcast. I really want to get into your career as we have this discussion, but I wanted to start with this week's big game, the Super Bowl, and you have what I heard is Seattle is your adopted hometown. You have a lot of strong ties to Seattle. So, how excited are you for one of your former teams and your hometown team, I guess, right now to be going to the Super Bowl this weekend?
I'm really excited for not only the organization, but also the city. Like you said, I do have ties here, and I went to the University of Washington way back in 1975. Went to a Rose Bowl there and then played for the Seahawks at the end of my career for a couple of years, and then I was part of their radio broadcast team for 15 years. So I have quite a bit of a lineage with them, and still support a lot of the different things they do that they invite me to come out to. And so I definitely want to see them win this thing. I broadcasted their first 3 Super Bowls, believe it or not, got a Super Bowl ring out of it, and now they've got a chance to win another one. So hopefully they can get the job done on Sunday.
So just from a fan's perspective, I've been hoping to see the Seahawks win as well, mostly because of Sam Darnold. He's really been a guy that's been kind of not really been given the chance he's needed. And then when he has succeeded in Minnesota, he ended up going to Seattle. So I've been a Seahawks fan for that reason. But then earlier this week or last week, Cam Newton came out and spoke about Drake May, saying the Patriots would be there with any quarterback. It wasn't Drake May. So, from a quarterback perspective, I mean, you see these guys being criticized or really having to fight for their credibility and their respect. What would those two guys, what are they going through this week? How are they approaching this game based on some of those different experiences they've had?
I've played in a lot of championship games, and what you try and do is you try and make it as normal as you possibly can. You try and say, okay, it's just another game. I'm going to go through my same preparation that I've gone through the whole season. But you can't say that, because a championship week is totally different than a playoff game week or a regular season week. There's just so much more asked of your time. Your schedule's switched around a lot from what it normally is. And football players are big creatures of habit. They like to stay within the same routine. Well, your routine is definitely interrupted when you're going into a championship week. You're getting up in the morning, you got to speak to the media before practice. Then there's probably some time you have to speak to them after practice. You've got other kind of functions involved. You've got family in town that you normally don't have on the road with you. So there's just a lot of different things going on that kind of interrupt your preparation. And you try, again, to keep it as normal as you possibly can, so you can go out there and play the way you've been playing all season.
The thing about the quarterback position, and I've heard this from a few of the people that we've interviewed, is that really want to stay to quarterback. Steve Young was like this, was one. Jim Kelly was like this, and then part of your story is this way too. And that's what I'm been fascinated by the most is, like, I've seen your career as a fan. I know everything you've done with the Oilers and Vikings and so forth, but what I'm thinking most impressed about was when other people were not willing to bet on you, you bet on yourself. And I don't know where that comes from, but it does really show the fire of competition and just belief and confidence in yourself. So right out of high school, you excelled in high school. You really wanted to say, I'm a quarterback. I want to go college, play quarterback. You opted to go to JUCO rather than change positions. You were faced with that out of college and going to the NFL where they want you to change positions. You're like, no, I'm going to be a quarterback. Like, where does that come from? Like, how do you feel that you assessed yourself and point where I can succeed as a quarterback, and what lessons might be there in there for another player that is just really focused on being in that certain position?
Yeah, I think a lot of my internal fortitude comes from my mom, just the way I was raised. I grew up, my dad passed away when I was 7 years old. I had 6 sisters, so I was kind of the man of the house. So I was thrust into this position of maturity at a very younger age than I should have been. And I took that challenge on. My mother was somebody who could have, I don't know, been destroyed by the fact that she lost her husband at such a young age with all these children, and she could have just decided to live off the government and not do anything with her life. But she went back to school. She went to nursing school. She became a nurse. She took care of us as if she was home every day. And we had hot meals on the table every day. She was working 2 shifts sometimes. Uh, I just never really knew that I was poor or anything like that, even though we didn't have we didn't have as much as other kids around. I could see that, but she always was able to provide somehow for everything that, especially I needed playing sports, whether it was equipment or the money that it took to register to play all these different sports. And she got me involved in sports at a very young age to get me around more boys and to get me around more male mentors because I didn't have a dad, I didn't have any brothers. And then I just took off with it because I was a pretty good athlete for some reason, and I kept working at it. So I think that's a lot where it starts. And I saw how she was able to take care of us when the odds were against her, and she didn't quit. And that always stuck inside of me that my mom didn't quit on me, so why should I quit on my family and on myself? So that's something that just kept driving me to show what I could do and just have the wherewithal to keep fighting to be the best that I could be, because I had a lot of belief in my abilities based off of the peer groups that I was around as a young kid. I could see how I compared to other kids in my neighborhood, other kids that I played against in Pop Warner, that I played against in high school, that I played against in college. And as long as I felt like I could keep competing and was at just a higher level as those guys, why should I have to take a back seat and play another position if I'm just as good as the guys that I'm playing against?
So the quarterback position, you obviously had the career you had. You were described as a trailblazer, one of the first African American quarterbacks to really sustain in that position. And you also mentioned in your last response that you matured at a faster rate, or you were forced to grow up maybe faster than the other kids. Is there a sense that, and I'll take it back to Pop Warner. I said, we're about youth football, youth sports, but really we are about youth development. We hope to prepare these kids for opportunities and experiences, good or bad, that await them in their life. So as you came up through your whole experience, even in Canada, in the NFL, and you were able to really set a new trail for black quarterbacks, do you feel like with your upbringing that that moment really called for Warren Moon? And what about your childhood and your own development just prepared you to be that person to really set the league on a different path?
That's not something I really thought about way back in those days, but there were other guys that I looked up to as far as, like Marlon Briscoe, when he was the first African American quarterback to start an NFL game in 1968. I was, what was I, 12 years old at the time or something like that when that happened. And then James Shaq Harris came to the Rams where I lived in Los Angeles, and he became the quarterback there. So there were two guys that I could see as African Americans that were playing this position, and maybe there's a chance for me to play it one day if I continue to keep doing what I needed to do. And so those guys gave me inspiration and motivation, no question about it. But again, back to my childhood, it was all about the way I was brought up and the way I was raised. My mother raised us to be very respectful of people. She raised us to be very, very hard workers. She taught me just like I was one of the girls in my family. I could cook, I could clean, I could sew, I could iron. I did it all, and I was really able to take care of myself once I got to college and all that because of the training that I got growing up, in that household. So I owe so much of my success to her, and she's still alive, believe it or not. She's going to be 99 years old later on this month, and she's just one of the strongest women that I've ever experienced in my life.
So a lot of things you just touched on there is just really relates to leadership, maybe your mom's leadership of the family. But
Yeah.
I can imagine going back in the 80s when you're coming into the league, particularly the NFL, that you needed to have some sort of leadership qualities or some sort of leadership position that you just had to embrace and be that leader. Like, what was it like in the locker room going into maybe that first Houston Oilers season, or even in Edmonton, that just really propelled you into that leadership position? And and how were you able to be embraced by your teammates?
See, I think your leadership really starts by the way you present yourself, by how you come into the locker room. When do you come into the locker room? Do you come in when you have to be there at 8 o'clock and you get there, 2 minutes to 8, or are you there at 7? Doing extra stuff to get ready before you actually start the day. So I've tried to lead by example. I showed everybody that I was a hard worker, that I was willing to do any and everything. Um, I was there after when the day was over. When those guys left, I was still there. And those things rub off on people. And then all of a sudden you get a chance to go out on the field and compete with them, and then they can see what your abilities are, and that's when you start to earn that respect, because now you're making plays. You're out there doing the things that get guys excited that maybe we have a chance to win with this guy. So it starts with your preparation and how you carry yourself, how you work. I think that's where leadership comes from, and then it takes another step when you get on the field and you show your abilities, and then you get another step when you get into games and you start making plays that help your team win.
That's great perspective on your fellow or your teammates. But what about coaches? One of the interesting story I found really interesting was you had a really good relationship with Hugh Campbell in Edmonton, so much that Houston signed him as head coach as a way to lure you down there. But like you've also played under Denny Green, and what are some of the things you've taken from your coaching over the years, and how has that impacted you?
Well, Coach Campbell, he was one of the most laid back guys you ever want to be around, but he was very good at putting people together, putting a team together as far as the right personalities, the right talent. You didn't always have to have the greatest talent at every position, but you had to have the right guys that could work and play together. And he did such a great job of that in the 6 years, or the 5 years I played with him there. We always made subtle changes to our roster every year. Even though we were winning championships, we never stayed the same. And that's what I loved about him. And he was the guy that let me go out and do my thing. Even though I was a young player, I called my own plays when I was there. And that's just not something they do today. We did that back in the day where we could call our own plays. So that made me have to get more into the game plan. I had to get more into exactly what my attack mode was going to be against that particular team, and that's something that really made me buy into our game plan a little bit more than say a guy might do today, where everything is communicated to his helmet and all he has to do is execute.
Interesting. So you called your own plays. Did you call your own plays in Houston as well?
I did not. Again, the NFL was not like that when I came into the league, and there were guys, I think maybe the generation right before me, that were calling their own plays, and then all of a sudden technology started to take over, and all of a sudden the coaches wanted to have more control of it.
The speaking of your time in Houston, I know you were or that team was known for its run and shoot offense, and that really allowed the team to take advantage of some of your strength as a passer. Did you enjoy playing in that system, and was that system pretty much designed to take advantage of those strengths that you have?
Yeah, I think it was designed because they athletically they know that I could do the things that position asked for. It was an offense. It was a lot of fun, and when we were clicking, it was hard to stop. But it was also an offense that you had a tough time trying to close out games if you didn't have a big lead, because you had to keep throwing the football. It wasn't a run-oriented offense where you put two tight ends in there and just try and run the ball out to run the clock out, and you continually had to throw the football. We didn't even have tight ends on our roster, so the onus was always on me to be sharp through the whole game, and also you took a lot of punishment because we threw the ball so much that I took a lot of hits, not so much with the ball, but a lot of times after the ball was gone that people don't see. But yeah, it was a fun offense to be involved in, and it also was an offense where I audibled quite a bit. I had a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage based off of the looks that I saw. So there were some games I'd go into and almost audible half the plays that came in. So that gave me a lot of command of the offense as well.
You mentioned this closing out games, and I think back to the AFC Central, and you were one of the good quarterbacks of the AFC Central. And I'm sure you went up against, well, you did go up against Boomer Esiason and Bernie
Oh,
Kosar for
yeah.
several years in terms of
Bernie
like,
Kosar.
what's that competition like when you get up and you're in a game and against another opposing team that has a really solid quarterback as well? Is there a little bit more of an intensity between the two of you?
Yeah, even though you're not on the field at the same time, you're going against each other because I know that Boomer's going to put points on the board, and I know that Bernie Kosar is going to put points on the board, and I know that Bubby Brister is going to put points on the board. So I know I've got to do the same. I can't go into a game and maybe score 17 points and expect to win. Now, if our defense was able to play that well that day, then that's great. But I knew I had to go in there needing to score at least in the 20s of some sort, and maybe even more than that, depending on the way the game went. So, yeah, even though you don't play against great quarterbacks on the field at the same time, you're playing against them as far as what they're capable of doing offensively and what you're capable of doing offensively.
Yeah, that's interesting because you mentioned earlier that you were a pass heavy, run and shoot was pass heavy. So part of like not letting them score is keeping them off the field. So that puts more pressure back on you, just to keep you guys on the field. Maybe not even in a scoring drive each time, but at least on the field. So I can see that being a little bit of a challenge. Who would you think is the best competitor from a quarterback perspective that you went up against in your career?
Wow, competitor. Man, there was a lot of them. John Elway was a great competitor. I remember losing to him in the playoffs. Last 2-minute drive of a game, we had a lead, and he takes them down, I think, 98 yards with a minute and 50 seconds left in the game to beat us at the end. And I lost to him twice in the playoffs. And Joe Montana was a great competitor as well. I lost to him in the playoffs when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, there was so many. Dan Marino, we had some great battles against each other. I played in a very quarterback-rich time in the NFL where I think there's something like 9 or 10 quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame now that were playing during the time that I was playing, whether it was Steve Young, whether it was Montana or Elway or Marino, or Jim Kelly, myself. Just a lot of great quarterbacks during that time that I had to go against all the time. And for me to be considered one of the best, I had to really come with it every year and make sure that I was on top of my game if I wanted to be considered one of the best.
Well, you averaged 3,000 yards a season for 10 straight years in Houston. That's the stat I'm seeing now. And then I know there's games that stick out from a fan perspective. There's those Warren Moon games. So is there, I think I know the answer to this or what you might say, but is there a game that you feel like you were just on and it was probably one of the best games you've played? Does this one game stand out for you?
Yeah, it's probably a game we played against Kansas City Chiefs in 1990. I think I went over 500 yards in that game. And the thing that impressed me more about the game than the yardage and all that itself is who I was going against. I was playing against probably one of the best. I think they were number 2 in the league at the time in defense. They had Derek Thomas on the front line, Dan Saliamola, and Neil Smith. Secondary, they had Ron Cherry. I mean, I could go on and on. I think they had 7 Pro Bowlers on their defense. And just a really good defense. We're going into Kansas City playing in the rain and sleet. Most people didn't think we could play in that type of weather because we were a dome team. So for us to go out there and put up that type of number against those type of players, that's what I was more impressed by than anything else. The fact that we were playing against such a great team.
Yeah, you threw for 527 yards that game.
Yeah, and I probably could have threw for more. I came out a little bit early, but because we had the game won, and I felt like we might be playing these guys again in the playoffs, and I didn't want to do anything to run the score up, but I think I could have set the single game record for passing that day, and it didn't even faze me. When they asked me about it on the sideline, I said, no, I need to come out of the game, and I'll get a chance to break that somewhere down the road or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said exactly the game I would have thinking you were going to say. Randall McDaniel said the same thing. Steve Young said something very similar about his favorite play, I believe. And it's just interesting that as a fan, we look at certain things, and these are that Warren Moon moment, and it is for you as well as a player. So it's we've all enjoyed your feats as much as you do. So it's, but one of the things you had mentioned earlier about joining the Hall of Fame, and I know there's a lot of conversation about the Hall of Fame right now related to certain people, but I don't want to get into that. But just like the standard of the Hall of Fame, do you have like what is the standard of a Hall of Fame? Like what makes a player reach the status of Pro Football Hall of Fame?
I think it's the body of work over the course of his career, and usually I think the standard is about 10 years and more. How did you stand up at your position during that period of time in the National Football League against everybody you played against? And I think that's what a lot of people go by.
Do you have
See some guys who didn't get in because they probably didn't play long enough or that type of thing, and maybe it takes them a little bit longer to get in because they didn't fit that standard of number of years of a career. I think that has more to do with it than anything else. And so much is put on the Super Bowl and things like that, but that should be important. There's no question about it because you play a team sport to win a championship, but sometimes you're just not on a team that is good enough to win one. But that doesn't take away from what your individual abilities were over the course of your career and how you were feared by other people and the honors that you made throughout the time that you were playing. All those different things go into it.
Are you active with the Hall of Fame?
Beg pardon?
Are you active with the Hall of Fame? Do you do a lot of activities with
I'm
them?
actually on the board of trustees, and
Okay.
I'm also on the Players Advisory Board. So this is my 25th year, I think, my 20th year this year in the Hall of Fame. So it's been a long time in there, and I've seen a lot of guys come in. I've seen a lot of guys not get voted in that everybody thinks should be. And I think most of the guys that get to that final ballot, I think they're going to eventually get in. It just might take a little bit longer because there's so many guys that have played this game that are waiting, and we only let so many guys in a year. So in a sport like football, where you have 22 guys out there on offense and defense, and you also have special teams guys, kickers, punters, and so I think more guys should be let in that we're letting in, but everybody seems to complain about the number that we are letting in.
Yeah. No, that's true, and I know it's always up for debate. But do you take any joy in being able to advocate for certain players?
I try to stay away from that as much as I can. And I get calls every year from different players, representatives or whatever, and asking what I can do. I really have no say so over the selectors. The selectors aren't even, except for I think we have 4 Hall of Famers that are on the selection committee because we want to make sure that we're represented that way. But other than that, we don't have a whole lot of say-so as far as who those guys vote for. So I try to stay away from that because there's so many guys that are capable of being Hall of Famers, and I don't want to get into that back and forth over that.
One of the things that's unique about you is you're in the CFL Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and a lot of it's been written about you. I mean, you were absolutely a great quarterback. Your stats line up with that statement. But part of your story is you being one of the first black quarterbacks. And what I've appreciated about looking into your story a little bit is you don't necessarily want to be a black quarterback. You wanted to be a quarterback that was black, but you accepted the responsibility of that was kind of entrusted with you in that position.
Right.
What kind of progress have you seen since you came in to the pro ranks, whether it's CFL or NFL, in terms of race relations and opportunities for African Americans to play the quarterback position?
Oh, it's been tremendous. Tim, of all the different things that I've accomplished in the game, whether it's numbers or wins or the different Hall of Fames that I'm in or all that, I'm more proud of the fact that I was able to help play a role in providing more opportunities for other African American quarterbacks to get their chance to play. Because for many, many years, a lot of quarterbacks didn't opportunities that deserved it. And all you really want, that's all I ever really wanted, was an opportunity to show what I could do. And if I wasn't good enough, then I'd go do something else. I'd quit the game and go do something else, or maybe change positions. But I knew I would have never changed positions. I probably would have gone to law school, which was something I was going to do if I didn't make it into football. But because all these guys now are getting those opportunities, it's because of myself and Randall Cunningham and Doug Williams winning a Super Bowl and being the MVP. Those are the reasons why those guys started to get those opportunities. And now you saw the position start to really take off with, Michael Vick being the first overall pick and Cam Newton being the first overall pick, and all these guys going in the top 10 of quarterbacks being drafted. And this past year, we had 16 African American quarterbacks start the season off as starters. So that's tremendous progress, and something that makes me proud every time I watch these guys play, and maybe I stick my chest out just a little bit further each Sunday when I see these guys playing and doing very well. And I know that I played a small part in that.
Do you have any role with any of the guys? Are you a mentor figure? Or do you have an opportunity to really engage with them as they begin this pursuit in this career?
Oh yeah, I've gotten friendships and relationships with a lot of guys throughout the league over the years, and whether it was way back with Donovan McNabb or Cordell Stewart or Jameis Winston. I mean, I keep in touch with all types of guys. I give them advice if they need it. I want them to know that I'm there if they need me. I'm not a guy that's going to be bearing down on you trying to tell you what to do and how to do it, because you have coaches and different things for that. But there are situations that they go through that only an African American quarterback could relate to, that maybe I could help them with, because I've gone through it all. So I just want them to know that I'm there as a sounding board if they need me. And if I think they need some words of encouragement, I'll text them that. If they need some words of congratulations, I'll do the same. And just to let them know that I'm there.
You have 4 kids of your own, so you have 5 kids of your own, right?
5 kids.
Yeah. Do you get to play the role of youth sports dad?
When my kids were young, I was in the middle of my career, so I didn't get a chance to be the dad, and I didn't really want to be one of their coaches. I just felt like that was a little too much with everything else. They had enough pressure on them just being my child, and I didn't want to put any more pressure on them. I wanted their coaches to go out there and coach them, and if I saw things that I felt like I could interject or give them advice on, I would do it. I got my kids trainers. I did everything that I could to make sure that they were as prepared as they could be to perform in the sports that they were performing in. But I also missed some of their time because of playing football, being on the road, or whatever it might have been. And that's something that I hated, but I also was at a lot of their games because they were all involved in a lot of different sports. So there was a lot of different games, whether it was they were on the swim team. My son was a really good swimmer. I mean, my daughters played soccer. They played volleyball. My son played football and baseball. So there was a lot of games. They also danced, and I went to a lot of dance recitals. So yeah, there was a lot, and we were on the road a lot, traveling, because a lot of those AAU teams, you travel. You go from city to city to city. So it puts a lot on your family, and but it also brings your family closer together because you guys are traveling as a whole family doing all these different things. And I felt like my kids really learned a lot and flourished from being involved in sports. And I think all kids should try and get involved in sports if they can. And it doesn't matter what level they get to. It's just all the lessons that you learn from playing sports, competing, and being involved in a team and setting goals for you. So all those different things are going to help you when you get into your regular life, whether you play a sport as a profession or not. And I think if you look at most companies and corporations, they like to hire people that have been involved in sports in some way, somehow, just because of the competitive edge they bring to the table.
Yeah, that's great. And I have one last question. It's interesting. You had mentioned in your response there that you didn't want to get too involved because you didn't want to put pressure on the kids or the coach, and that makes sense. You're Warren Moon. But when we all look at the youth sports landscape right now, there's a lot of reporting, a lot of statistics out there. That a lot of kids are leaving because there's too much pressure put on them by their parents who are not Warren Moon or a professional athlete. So just thinking in terms of that, and what you also said, like we want to keep kids in sports. I mean, if you took the perspective of not adding a lot of pressure on the kids, on coaching in that environment, like, is there any advice you would give to parents that might need to take the same approach that you took with your kids?
I think the one thing I would try and tell them from the very beginning is you get involved in sports to have fun. And I think what parents are doing today is they're taking the fun out of it because they want their kid to go to the next level. They want their kid in some long-range vision to be maybe a professional one day. A lot of parents play their kids because of what they didn't do. They want to play through their kids, and that's not the reason why you should do this. What you should do is be as supportive as you can to your young one. Give them all the different tools that they need to be successful, and then be there to cheer them whether they win or lose. But the main thing you want to make sure is they have fun while they're doing this. And if they're not having fun doing it, and that's with anything they do, like whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, if they're not having fun with it, then they shouldn't be doing it. So it's something that you want to enjoy. You want to get joy out of it every time you do it, because when you get that joy out of it, you want to come back and do it again the next day, and you can't wait till the next day. That's what I loved about playing sports when I was a young kid. I couldn't wait. My mother would tell me to come in, at night when the lights are on the street and it's time to come in. I couldn't wait till the next day to get out there to play again. So that's what I think has been taken out of it by a lot of parents is the fun that these kids should be getting out of playing sports. And that's one of the reasons why maybe they don't want to stay involved, because they're not having the fun that they need to have.
Perfect. Hey, man, I really appreciate your time today. Great catching up. And thanks for joining the podcast.
So thanks for having me on, Tim. Really appreciate it.
For Pop Warner, I'm your host, Tim Glaze. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. This podcast is a production of Pop Warner Little Scholars, the premier national governing body for youth football and cheer and dance. Visit us at popwarner.com.